is Bizarro, and why does DC keep rebuilding him as this bizarre Superman opposite? I mean, on paper, he's this chalky, skinny guy who's the opposite of Superman. He talks backwards and can't even get a sentence right. He's the butt of the joke a lot of times. But when you strip away all the punchlines, underneath all that, there's one of the strangest bodies in the entire DC universe. He first stumbled into existence back in Superboy's 68th issue in 1958. And oh boy, what a marvel he is. Everything about him is in reverse. And right now, in 2026, we're introduced to a new version called B1Z in My Adventures with Superman, which practically throws everything we've known about him so far out the window. So let's take a deep dive into this bizarre anatomy of Bizarro. Who is Bizarro, and how was he first created? So here's the thing. Technically speaking, there are two first Bizarros who were born about a year apart. The true original showed up in 1958, and he wasn't even a Superman double. He was Superboy's double. A scientist was demonstrating a newly invented duplicating ray and was testing it out on things like jewels and radium pellets. And just the way it happens in real labs, an accident with the duplicating machine caused it to copy Superboy, who was standing in the room. The duplicate that stepped out was a chalky-skinned dude, completely unstable and unaware of his strength. The scientist insisted that he wasn't truly alive, but he walked out of the lab anyway. Teenage Bizarro just wanted to be accepted, like most of us wanted when we were teens. But his behavior kept scaring everyone off in Smallville, except for one blind girl named Melissa. He was happy with that, but when he eventually realized that she accepted him because she couldn't see him, something broke inside him. He smashed into the remains of the duplicating machine, and the explosion that followed restored Melissa's eyesight. Tragic, I know. Then we come to Lex Luthor. He was the one who turned this into an actual recurring franchise. See, he got his hands on the duplicator's blueprints and built his own version of the ray. And the moment it was up and running, he aimed it at Superman in the Action Comics 254th issue that came out in 1959. What he got out of it was a confused, hulking duplicate who had no idea who he was and what he was supposed to do. Basically, it ruined the plans Lex Luthor had of having a super soldier that he could control. Luthor obviously got arrested on the spot for creating him, while Bizarro wandered into Metropolis trying to help people, only to cause chaos instead. This second version is what most of us think of when we talk about this character. But remember the original one who came before him. Why is everything about Bizarro literally backwards? This is the most interesting part about Bizarro that even to this day catches me off guard. When Luthor created him, he was a straight copy of Superman. Then, during the Superman number 305 to 306 storyline, the writers fully committed to the idea of giving Bizarro reversed versions of Superman's powers. They gave him powers that mirrored Superman's in bizarre ways, including Arctic vision and flame breath, while later stories introduced even stranger reversed abilities. From there, later stories expanded the idea with increasingly bizarre reversed powers. This Arctic vision fires twin sub-zero beams that can freeze anything on contact hard enough to give frostbite. And the heat breath? Yeah, that can melt steel at full intensity. Full-on napalm-level crisis, if you get what I mean. He does have X-ray vision, but it doesn't work the way Superman's X-ray vision does. Superman can see through everything but lead, and Bizarro can see through only lead, which I don't think can be considered a superpower given how niche it is. He also has X-ray hearing that allows him to hear through everything except lead. His telescopic vision? Yeah, that only sees a short distance behind his own head. And his microscopic vision makes objects shrink for everyone else watching instead of magnifying them. He also has vacuum breath, which pulls air and people towards him instead of blasting them away. And he also has something called spotlight vision, which is, well, a spotlight that can highlight everything he's looking at because we are gimmick maxing here. Why does green kryptonite heal Bizarro instead of killing him? This little nifty trick he has up his sleeve is pretty cool. Green kryptonite is a no-no for Superman. But for Bizarro, It is the biggest yes. Many versions of Bizarro are strengthened by green kryptonite, much like Superman's empowered by yellow sunlight. And his one true weakness? That's blue kryptonite, which doesn't occur naturally everywhere in the universe. It was a lab product through and through. And how do you make blue kryptonite, you ask? Very good question. So Superman would turn that duplicating machine onto a pile of green kryptonite, and out comes blue kryptonite. But this was in the early rampages of Bizarro and Superman. In later stories, we learn that the blue kryptonite radiation can reach Bizarro even through lead shielding. So his people went out of their way to duplicate Bizarro lead that could specifically block the rays. It sounds like nuclear warfare, because, in a way, it is. But all of this is happening for laughs. And actually, back in Superman Batman number 25, Bizarro is briefly given a blue kryptonite ring. But donning it gave him intellect, so that he was able to speak in complete sentences. Now, that's a good thing, right? He can finally connect with people, huh? Yeah, that didn't happen. The ring temporarily improved his intelligence and speech, but he eventually discarded it and returned to his usual self. Did Bizarro get married and have kids? If Superman can have kids, so can Bizarro. And yes, he does. But this is where his reversed anatomy gimmick becomes very strange. Bizarro's family wasn't created naturally at first. The duplicating machine produced Bizarro Lois, and together they eventually had a child. As we can see in Action Comics number 254 and 255, Lois Lane used the duplicating ray on herself, creating Bizarro Lois, who immediately fell in love with Bizarro. Then they eventually fled Earth together because they wanted to find a place where they could exist without being hunted. Reasonable ask, if you ask me. So where did they go? They go to Atri, which is Earth spelled backwards. It's an abandoned world that is covered in ruins that Bizarro and his wife considered their home point. Then, in Superman's 140th issue, we see that the Bizarro couple now has a child. But the kid looks completely normal, and that's treated as a complete catastrophe, because everyone else in this world looks like Bizarro. Plus, Bizarro also made the Bizarro Code, which decreed that everything on this A-tree should look wrong or incorrect, because he hated how Earth had treated him, and he wasn't going to tolerate any earthly things on his world. So when the baby came out looking right, the baby was treated like a freak. After a series of adventures involving Superman and Supergirl, the child was eventually reunited with his parents, looking Bizarro-like appropriately. The child's journey eventually led to a larger conflict between Atri and Earth, and every time I see him, all I can think about is that war. How did Bizarro's body replicate an entire cube-shaped planet? In the 2007 storyline Escape from Bizarro World, Bizarro gains a new ability under a blue sun called Bizarro Vision. Using this vision, he can create Bizarro duplicates seemingly out of nothing. And that's how his entire planet got populated. He even ended up with an entire Justice League of his own, complete with Superman as the worst detective, an Aquaman that can't swim, and a Green Lantern who's a coward. Now, this is kind of like a modern take on his biology. In the earlier tellings, what happened was that Bizarro and Bizarro Lois showed up on the planet and realized they had no one to talk to. So Bizarro used all the leftover technology found in the ruins and built himself an imitator ray. Using that, he cranked out duplicate after duplicate so that he could build a Bizarro city from scratch. It goes without saying that this is a very unusual superpower. I mean, it's mostly comic book logic, but there's a real-life example that I can loosely base it on. It's not the same thing, but think about how hydras reproduce. They sprout new offspring from their bodies. It's a loose comparison, but it's the closest real-world example I could think of. So it's not impossible, but damn, I love the way the comics have portrayed it. What's the wildest fight Bizarro has ever been in? One of the funniest Silver Age Bizarro stories perfectly shows how absurd these comics could get. They're on opposite sides of the spectrum, but I have to tell you side by side because this man right here is inconsistent to the fullest. In Superman's 169th issue, Bizarro shows up on Earth with his army and a peculiar request. He goes to Superman and tells him that they're doing a huge favor for Superman by smashing his planet. And by planet, he means the illuminated advertising globe that sits on top of the Daily Planet building. But before they can get into that, a sparrow flutters past them, and the entire army freaks out and runs. Why? Because a harmless bird can't obviously harm invulnerable beings, so we have to run. I know, it doesn't make sense. It's Bizarro sense. And Superman, who is watching all of this, realizes that they aren't actually a threat, so he lets them do whatever they want to do. And what do they want to do? They want to fix the crack in the Liberty Bell, straighten out the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and give new arms to Venus de Milo. Very do not resist, you are being rescued coded behavior. Beautiful. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where Bizarro defeated Trigon. Yeah, the demon Trigon, who's one of the most dangerous cosmic threats in DC, who absorbed evil from 100 galaxies. The confrontation began in Red Hood Outlaw number 47, and culminated in issue number 49, where Bizarro ripped out Trigon's heart and defeated him. Not only that, we've seen Bizarro survive the direct force of a nuclear blast, even though it left him in critical condition, because walking off fine is for cool guys, and Bizarro can't be cool. That just doesn't seem right. When I tell you Bizarro is bizarre, that's what I mean. How did Bizarro get smarter? And what happened when he did? Now, remember the Rebirth era? Yeah, during this era, a version of Bizarro was found sealed in a tube inside a train car being stolen by Black Mask. This Bizarro then ends up teaming up with Red Hood and Artemis, becoming the third member of DC's Dark Trinity as a part of the Outlaws. Things were going pretty well, but then he struck with a sickness that causes his cells to rapidly deteriorate, and he dies saving his teammates. Lex Luthor then took his body and resurrected him, intending for Bizarro to serve LexCorp once again. And because of the high technology used, it leaves Bizarro with genuine genius-level intellect, something he's never had before. He starts to become a real member of the group, forming strategies and whatnot, instead of being comic relief. But like most good things in Bizarro's life, it doesn't last long. His upgraded mind eventually starts to slip back into his usual low intelligence, and Bizarro doesn't want that to happen. He takes matters into his own hands and begins relying on a synthetic kryptonite treatment, hoping it will preserve his newfound intelligence. Artemis realized what was happening and confronted him, but Bizarro's struggle to preserve his intelligence continued. Was there really a Bizarro Carnage hybrid called Bizarnage? I know it sounds insane, but it's true. In the 1990s, Marvel and DC ran amalgam comics together that brought their characters together in single hybrid versions across a few one-shot comics. We had Darkclaw as a Batman-Wolverine fusion, and Super Soldier as a Superman and Captain America fusion. The Spider-Boy corner of that universe is the one that gave us Bizarnage, the fusion of Bizarro and Carnage. The character's origin here leans into the same botched duplication arc, but this time there's an alien DNA replication that went wrong at a Cadmus-style lab. And on top of that, his entire motivation in the story is to replace Spider-Boy completely to take over the hero's life, much like how Bizarro always wanted to take over Superman's life. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest you do, because it is such a fun read. Did Bizarro almost appear on screen decades before anyone realized? When you think about the weakest entries in the entire Superman film catalog, you're probably thinking about Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, which is definitely sitting with Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin for the Batman list. But if you look into the production notes from that movie, you'll find out that Superman was supposed to square off against a clone right outside a popular Metropolis nightclub. This creature was originally the early prototype of what we now know as Nuclear Man in the finished 1987 film. The scene didn't survive the edit, but if it had, then a character strongly resembling Bizarro could have appeared in live action roughly 2 years before Bizarro's first official live-action adaptation on Superboy in 1989. While I understand why they didn't go through with it, I can't help but imagine what that scene actually looked like with 80s special effects. Maybe it would have made Superman 4 a movie so bad that it's actually fun to watch. How was Bizarro handled in Smallville, and why did fans dislike him? We all watched Smallville, and we all had our opinions on it. But when Smallville gave us Phantom and Bizarro in seasons 6 and 7, some comic fans were disappointed because the series completely abandoned the classic duplicating Ray origin. Why? Because they ditched the whole duplication premise completely. Here, Bizarro is a Phantom Zone Wraith who was imprisoned there for a long time. Then he was accidentally released by Clark Kent and survived by possessing a succession of human hosts until he finally stole some of Clark's DNA and built himself a permanent physical body. He got the Kryptonian powers and strength from this process. And because he started as a Wraith, he gets an inverted version of Clark's specific energy absorption ability, the whole green Kryptonite thing strengthening him instead of weakening, etc. He is destabilized the more time he spends under direct sunlight, which I feel like is one of the very few things they got right. Eventually, Clark and Martian Manhunter together defeated the Wraith, but then it escaped and came back as an ally of Brainiac before our heroes finished them off for good. I feel like the original origin story had a lot more substance and nuance to it than this one does. I liked that it was funny. It had a core message. Like, Bizarro felt unaccepted here, so he left and found a home for himself where he could be accepted and feel normal. Don't we all crave to be considered normal sometimes, even though we know that normalcy is a societal construct? And I feel like Bizarro's origin story truly showcases that which Smallville could have cashed in on and given us something heartfelt and heavy-hitting. But instead, they went down this weird, straightforward, evil possession route, which I genuinely cannot appreciate. How is My Adventures with Superman Season 3 reinventing Bizarro right now? Let's come to the thing that made us make this video in the first place. The Season 3 premiere introduced us to a version of Bizarro named B1Z, who was grown out of the wreckage of a covert LexCorp cloning initiative rather than a duplicating Ray accident. And in true villain fashion, he was raised in total isolation by a scientist. The scientist is named George Otto Bender, which appears to be a tribute to Bizarro's creators, writer Otto Bender and artist George Papp. And in the show, this caretaker raised Bizarro with recorded lessons about kindness and appreciating life, something that Kal-El's own parents left for him before Krypton was destroyed. The morals ingrained in Bizarro describe how he's really just a gentle giant with an impressionable mind. He has true heroic potential, which is shown further by showrunner Brendan Claher. In an interview with Comic Book, he stated, "Bizarro just has this different path, and I related to him because I grew up with ADHD myself. I was at summer camps with kids with autism and different types of disabilities, so I understand how deeply misunderstood neurodivergency is." In a nice touch that only deepens the parallel, did you know B1Z is voiced by Jack Quaid? He is the same actor voicing Superman himself, letting the opposite concept play out through vocal performance as well. And I, for one, love this take, because this might be the most consistently sympathetic take on Bizarro we've seen so far. Was Bizarro secretly the basis for a famous Seinfeld episode? Yeah, this is a confirmed bit. Jerry Seinfeld was a well-documented Superman fan in real life, with a statue of the Man of Steel visible in his apartment throughout the series. Now, in the 8th season episode of Seinfeld titled The Bizarro Jerry, we saw Elaine stumble into a group of friends who look like Jerry, George, and Kramer, but act like their moral opposite. Yeah, this was all based around the Bizarro concept, right down to the closing gag. Even Kevin's final line uses classic Bizarro-style speech, and the theme music plays backwards to finish the joke. It's a little pop culture crossover that I thought felt right to end this video with. Because under everything that we see about Bizarro, there is a genuine man there. He has the potential to be sweet, to be kind, to be someone worth looking up to, instead of being the butt of the joke. And even though it's been 68 years, DC still hasn't managed to decide how they want to portray this character because he's simply too confusing. Now here's a question for you guys. Whose reversed or cloned anatomy should we dissect next? Ultraman? Doomsday? Superboy Prime? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.